Greetings everyone. This is Vishakha Tripathi, forensic educator at Forensic Science Academy. So today in this video we are going to cover the formation and development of fingerprint. As in the previous video we have already seen about the history of fingerprints. Today we are going to study about how the fingerprint forms. The fingers that we touch on any surfaces. तो जो हमारे फिंगर्स हैं वो कैसे वो सरफेसेस पे अपने मार्क्स छोड़ेंगे, वो जो प्रिंट्स वहाँ पे छोड़ेंगे उनका रीज़न क्या है? उनका रीज़न है रिच पैटर्न्स. तो जो रिच पैटर्न्स दैट फॉर्म्स ऑन आवर फिंगर्स, हाउ दे डेवलप in the initial stages of life. We are going to cover all that in this video. So we all know that what is ridge patterns, right? The raised portion of epidermis. Now what is epidermis? Epidermis is the outermost layer of our skin. It is the skin that we touch. जो हम touch करते हैं, that skin, this surface or this layer in itself is called epidermis. So the raised portion of it, as you touch your fingers, right? So when we touch our fingers, we can feel that our fingers are little bit raised. So that raised portion is called the ridge pattern. And what is the timeline of formation? So the fingerprints begin to develop in the fetal stage. Fetal stage is the stage before our birth, right? When we all stay in the womb of our mothers, that stage is called the fetal stage. जब हम सब fetus के form में होते हैं, at that time, during the 10 to 16 weeks of gestation, the development of fingerprint starts to begin. Now, this process is primarily completed by 24th week of pregnancy. And how the process goes? It goes in two stages. That is the primary ridge formation followed by the secondary ridge formation and then the skin itself. So let's study about the layers. In the skin we have different layers. The deepest layer or the basement layer is called as the stratum basal, right? जो सबसे नीचे होगी. And how does it work? In this, the new skin cells are generated. Above the basal comes the stratum spinosum. In the spinosum layer, the cells begin to differentiate. They begin to divide. Then above the stratum spinosum comes the corneum. In the corneum, the dead cells are present. And after that comes the layer that is called the dermis, or we can also say it as dermal papillae. In this layer, it is beneath the epidermis that we all know. So what does and how does it work? It helps in the structure of the epidermis. हमारी जो फाइनल स्ट्रक्चर होगा that will be visible in the epidermis, right? But which layer helps it and which layer supports it? That is the dermis. So the above layer and the outermost layer is the layer that we all know, that is the epidermis. Now, how the ridge patterns form? During the fetal development, the epidermis forms ridges in a specific pattern as it interacts with the dermal papillae. The primary ridges appears first, followed by the development of secondary ridges. So, what does it say? That सबसे पहले हमारे hands में primary ridges का formation होगा and then that will be followed by the development of the secondary ridges, right? And the ridges formation is formed by the different interaction of the patterns and the specific layers. Now, the basal layer influence. The basal layer influence is the epidermis, which is the outermost layer and which is responsible for the ridge formation. It is supported by the number of patterns or the number of layers beneath it. And as the epidermis grows, the basal cells grows and differentiate, and the interaction between the epidermis and dermis gives rise to the formation of primary and secondary ridges. अगर आप सब ने नोटिस किया हो तो फिंगरप्रिंट इज़ समथिंग दैट डजेंट फेड थ्रू आउट योर लाइफ, राइट. हम अपने बचपन से लेके अपने बड़े होने तक, बड़े होने से लेके अपने बुढ़ापे तक कितने बार गिरते हैं, कितने बार हमारे एक्सीडेंट्स होते हैं, कितने बार हमारे हैंड्स में इंजरीज़ होती हैं, बट दोज इंजरीज़ कैन नेवर चेंज योर रिच पैटर्न्स एंड दे नेवर फेड्स योर रिच पैटर्न्स. So that how does it form? It forms from the basal layer. अगर कोई भी इंसिडेंट, कोई भी इंजरी अगर किसी चीज़ को हार्म कर रही है, देन इट इज़ गोइंग टू हार्म द एपिडर्मिस, द आउटर मोस्ट लेयर. मोस्ट ऑफ द मोस्ट इट इज़ गोइंग टू हार्म द डर्मिस, right? But the formation of the ridges is starting from the basal layer itself. So that is the core reason that why doesn't our ridge patterns changes with every injury, right? Now how does the primary ridge formation goes? First, the initiation. In the starting 10 to 10.5 weeks of the gestation period, the basal cells of the epidermis begin to divide rapidly as volar epidermis cell. Now they can be seen on the bottom of the epidermis, right? After that, once the volar pads are formed, the overall pattern that will become permanently established on the volar surface, it is going to happen after several weeks. During the cell growth, along with the primary ridge formation, proliferation, compartment is also formed, and this compartment encompasses basal cells and suprabasal cells, which also plays a role as a stem cells, which helps in the generation of new skin cells. What does it say? The same thing that I have already told you before, कि अगर हमें कोई भी इशू हो रहा है, कोई भी इंजरी हो रहा है, and the harm that caused to our skin, why doesn't it change the formation of our ridge patterns? Because the ridge pattern is supported by the beneath the layers, 5 layers beneath the epidermis. So the layers beneath the epidermis giving the support to the dermis and later to the epidermis. What is going to be harmed by any incident or by any accident is the epidermis. The same thing is described here. Coming to the secondary ridge formation, after the primary ridge grows in two directions, one towards the penetration of sweat gland and another the push toward the cell growth, the secondary ridge results in the downfolds of the basal epidermis, and the secondary ridge that grows downward increases the surface area of the attachment of the dermis layer, and the primary ridge are pushing the cells upward to keep the space for the growing hands. These two forces cause the folding of the epidermal layer. Now coming to the principle of fingerprinting, which is entirely based on the principle of permanency, infallibility and individuality. Now, what is permanency? Permanency is that before your birth till after your death, your fingerprint patterns, your ridge structure are going to be same. They are not gonna change throughout your life until and unless you have any rare kind of disease which affects your skin, which affects your ridge patterns. Anything other than that rarest condition can never change your ridge patterns or your permanency of your fingerprints. That makes fingerprint the permanent one, and that permanency gives them the importance as the evidence. So, what's written there? Let's read that too. The fundamental principle states that Fingerprints during the lifetime of an individual remains unchanged. They may enlarge with physical growth. This is the most significant characteristic of fingerprints that makes them useful for identity management, authentication, and biometric applications. Fingerprints never change themselves, but in some cases, due to wear or damage, they may distort or disappear. Being on fingertips, they are always the first point of physical contact. However, they are not damaged by superficial injuries. Some medical conditions can also cause fingerprints to disappear. The same thing, right? Now, coming to the infallibility. In this, it is nothing but the general ridge pattern that persists throughout our life on our fingertips is the something which makes what it makes possible the systematical classification of the fingerprint and the fingerprint system on which the whole dermatoglyphics work on, and that is the third fundamental principle of the fingerprint. We are going to deal with the last one after that. So infallibility tells us that everyone have different ridge patterns, and these ridge patterns are classified in different subclasses, and as per those classes we can say that no two individual have same fingerprint pattern. Now coming to the individuality, it is something that provide the uniqueness to the fingerprints. According to this principle, the fingerprint is an individual characteristic and no two fingers are found to have identical ridge patterns. This characteristic is so individual that even identical twins who share same genetic code do not share same fingerprints. Fingerprints are believed to be formed during the growth of the human embryo, and by the time it is 6 months old, fingerprints are formed. So it is saying even in the cases of twins, the DNA is going to be same. Their DNA is going to be ditto, like 99.999% same, but the fingerprint is going to differ. So that makes fingerprint the unique. It makes fingerprint the individual character, and that individuality gives fingerprint evidence the importance in the crime scene investigation. So in this video we have studied that how fingerprints develop and how they persist throughout our life and how the process goes on. Thank you everyone.